Nils Melzer, Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Cruel and Inhuman Treatment of the UN, writes this to President Trump. Mr. President, today I respectfully request that you pardon Mr. Julian Assange. Mr. Assange has been arbitrarily deprived of his liberty for the past 10 years. This is a high price to pay for the courage to publish true information about government misconduct throughout the world. I visited Mr. Assange in Belmarsh High Security Prison in London with 2 independent medical doctors, and I can attest to the fact that his health has seriously deteriorated to the point where his life is now in danger. Critically, Mr. Assange suffers from a documented respiratory condition which renders him extremely vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic that has recently broken out in the prison where he's being held. I ask you to pardon Mr. Assange because he is not and has never been an enemy of the American people. His organization, WikiLeaks, fights secrecy and corruption throughout the world and therefore acts in the public interest both of the American people and of humanity as a whole. I ask because Mr. Assange has never published false information. The cause for any reputational harm that may have resulted from his publications is not to be found in any misconduct on his part, but in the very misconduct that he exposed. I ask because Mr. Assange has not hacked or stolen any of the information he published. He has obtained it from authentic documents and sources in the same way as any other serious and independent investigative journalists conduct their work. While we may personally agree or disagree with their publications, they clearly cannot be regarded as crimes. I ask because prosecuting Mr. Assange for publishing true information about serious official misconduct, whether in America or elsewhere, would amount to shooting the messenger rather than correcting the problem he exposed. This would be incompatible with the core values of justice, rule of law, and press freedom, as reflected in the American Constitution and international human rights instruments ratified by the United States. I ask because you have vowed, Mr. President, to pursue an agenda of fighting government corruption and misconduct, and because allowing the prosecution of Mr. Assange to continue would mean that under your legacy, telling the truth about such corruption and misconduct has become a crime. In pardoning Mr. Assange, Mr. President, you would send a clear message of justice, truth, and humanity to the American people and to the world. You would rehabilitate a courageous man who has suffered injustice, persecution, and humiliation for more than a decade simply for telling the truth. Last but not least, you would give back to Mr. Assange's 2 young sons the loving father they need and look up to. You would reassure these children, and through them all children of the world, that there is nothing wrong with telling the truth, but that it is the right thing to do, that it is honorable to fight for justice, and indeed, that these are the values America and the world stand for. For these very reasons, I respectfully appeal to you to pardon Julian Assange. Whatever our personal views and sympathies may be, I believe that after a decade of persecution, this man's unjust suffering must end now. Please, use your power of pardon to right the wrongs inflicted on Julian Assange, to end his unjust ordeal, and reunite him with his family. I respectfully thank you for considering this appeal with foresight, generosity, and compassion. Please accept, Mr. President, the assurances of my highest consideration.